We are here to talk about a topic today that I wish, frankly, we didn't have to discuss. A topic that's heartbreaking on so many levels. And I have someone here with me, obviously, somebody that I know, I love, I look up to, that I think can bring some really wise insights and experiences to the sex scandal that's been tied to Ravi Zacharias, apologist and evangelist. I'm not going to go into some of the details before we start. You can Google it and find online exactly some of the details that have happened, but an outside firm essentially concluded from sexting to sexual misconduct to even cases of rape, Ravi Zacharias did in fact engage in sexual misconduct. Well, I want to bring my father, Josh Mcdowell, on to give his wisdom because, Dad, I think you offer some really unique perspective for two main reasons. One is, like Ravi, you are an apologist, a popular apologist, sold a ton of books, have a platform, have a ministry named after you. So from a ministry standpoint, but also for the past few years, you have shared that you have experienced really severe sexual abuse when you were younger and were not believed. One of the hardest days of your life is when you were not believed. So I think you bring an understanding of the hurt this caused to the victims, but also a ministry perspective that desperately needs to be heard. So let me start by just asking this question. What would your words of encouragement be to somebody who is either just a sexual abuse victim outside of this issue, or maybe somebody who was abused in particular by Ravi and just is trying to make sense of this personally? Is there hope or encouragement for that person?
Whenever I address this issue, I like to point out two things I've learned over the years in dealing with so many people in this area. One, it can happen to anyone. I don't care what your spiritual standing is, reputation, how many books you've done, talks you've given, how many churches you pastor, whatever. It can happen to anyone. Second, I can look almost every person in the eye and say, it wasn't your fault.
Hmm.
Most people think, well, it was my fault. I don't think I've ever found a situation where it was a victim's fault.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think that's important to realize. It wasn't your fault. And then what would I say to a victim?
Yeah.
Do you have a couple hours? I would, the first thing I could do for them would be to listen to them
Hmm.
and just say, tell me about your experience. Tell me about your spiritual journey and how this affected it. And let them talk. And while they're talking, don't interrupt them. But when the opportunity comes at the right time, for informative, ask informative questions. In other words, don't ask a question that you're wondering. Ask them a question about them. Well, how did that make you feel? When did you say that happened? Who was involved? It's what I call active listening. And you're pursuing information that they're sharing. And it tells that person, wow, he's really connected. He's right. He understands what I'm saying. And that's so important. So I would always ask that person for their journey. What's been your spiritual journey? How has this affected that? If they're married, I say, how's it affected your marriage?
Hmm.
How's it affected your perspective and view and relationship with Christ? How's it affected your church attendance and all? So probably for the first time I met with him, I just asked him questions
Hmm.
and listen. I've had to work hard over the years to be a good listener. And then I would say, I would ask them if they want help in this area. Some people don't.
Hmm.
And I would say 80%, 90% would say yes. And I say, would you mind if I share with you my perspective? And then I would go into my perspective of why, what, and how to deal with it.
Hmm.
So those are the first things I would do with a victim. And then I would definitely I would say at least 3 times with a week in between, follow up with them. Just give
Okay.
them a call or text me. How are you doing? Thanks for being so vulnerable and sharing that. Uh, are you doing okay today? Are you making it through the day? And it's interesting. You can almost progressively see people get better.
Hmm.
By the third talk, it's like a different person, a more positive attitude, everything in dealing with it.
Dad, even though you're an apologist, I appreciate that you've talked about this issue with honesty and tenderness and vulnerability, because I think we're really realizing how big it is culturally in ways we didn't understand in the past. Let's shift and talk more particularly about the Ravi Zacharias scandal. A lot of people want to know what you think. But tell me the first time, some of your first memories of just ever meeting him. How long ago was this? What were your impressions? Give us a little history of the relationship.
Your mom could answer a few things like this. Every time I went to the Northeast, Boston, further north, whatever, and spoke, for 2, 3 years, this young Indian man always showed up.
Hmm.
And he would always come right down front. If no seats, he would sit on the floor. And he would always jump to his feet and come right up to me to get first in line for questions. And he always had some really profound questions. And I remember several times I went back to the hotel with Dottie and I said, boy, there was a young man there tonight, an Indian fellow, that he's going to go places. She would always say, well, how do you know? He asked the right questions. He asked the right questions. And so I got to know Robbie through him following me around in the Northeast. And so when he would have some challenges, he would call me. And later on in life, I would call him.
Hmm.
Uh, and then I think the relationship changed a little when you remember this. We were at the Olympics in Atlanta. And I called up Robbie and said, hey, my family's here and why don't we get together and have dinner together? I'll pray, you pay. He said, okay. And so we met in that restaurant. We sat around the table with possibly a son and 2 daughters. I'm not sure. But you were there and one or two of your sisters were there. And we spent about 3 hours. And mainly it was Ravi talking, which we wanted. We just asked him a lot of questions and everything. And after that, it became a little more of a personal relationship. And if anyone would have asked me, who's the one person in the world you know would be the last person this would ever happen to, I wouldn't even hesitate. I would have said Ravi Zacharias.
Wow.
And not only me, I think many in the world, many professors at Oxford, many leaders all through Asia, everything
Hmm.
would say the same thing.
Hmm.
I've never been so taken by surprise, and I'd have to say hurt,
Hmm.
than when it came across my plate. And I didn't want to believe it, and I checked it out. And I remember it was one of the saddest days yet of my life
Oh.
when I had to admit it happened.
Hmm.
It happened. And I wish Ravi were alive, not to defend himself, but to explain himself.
Hmm.
I'd like to know if he had any remorse, if he struggled with that. I don't think he did, because one of the women he raped and a couple others said every time he finished, he'd always say, let's pray together and thank the Lord for this opportunity. Oh my gosh. So that pretty well shows there was no remorse. And if my heart goes out to anyone, it's not just the victims, it's his wife and children. I cannot even begin to imagine what they're going through, what they feel, their questions, their doubts, um, defending their husband, defending their father with
Sure.
all these accusations. Uh, I've so wanted to call each one of them, but somehow I've been hesitant to.
Hmm.
I don't want to say, well, you just want to take advantage of a situation. Well, I don't. I would only do it if I could minister to them and
Hmm.
encourage them. And that would be mainly just listening to them. So I say, anyone listening now, if you come across someone who's been a victim, anything like that, listen. And then when you finish, listen again. Then when you finish, listen again.
Hmm. Dad, one of the questions I saw it in the comment side that people have wrestled with, and there might not be an answer, is a number of people have asked me, they have said, is this a person who was a complete fraud from the beginning, or somebody who was caught in a double life and the pressures of his public life and the demands of his schedule
That's
built this
ridiculous.
in?
Demands of the scheduled public life has nothing to do with it.
Hmm.
I always say, if you can't take the heat, get out of the spotlight. The world will run just right without anyone.
Hmm.
God doesn't need us, he desires us. The world will not stumble regardless if the Pope fell. That'd be interesting. But anyway, uh, I what was the question again? I'm sorry.
So, for example, David Wood, our friend apologist, talked about how his best assessment was that Ravi probably lived a double life and just started hiding sin, and it barreled and snowballed, versus others who have argued, no, I think he was just a complete fraud manipulating this from the beginning. What are your thoughts even on approaching that?
I've never met anyone or know of anyone that started out as a complete fraud.
Hmm.
I've probably spent time and listened, asked questions to maybe 20 people, of which maybe 12, 14 were top leaders in the world who took the skids sexually. And one is very subtle. People excuse it. I deserve it. I need it. It's very subtle, and it seeps into your lifestyle, I think, little by little by little. And each time you make a wrong choice to turn to it, it becomes more profound in your own DNA. Where I would say after several years, it became Ravi Zacharias.
Hmm.
And that started a double life. Um, I've had several people say this to me because I'm getting calls from all over the world and say, I always thought he was a man of God. I always thought he taught the truth. How can I believe the scriptures and everything after this? And I point out that when God said, my word, and Ravi taught his word, he taught the gospel, he taught discipleship. My word will not return void. It doesn't say, if you stay pure, my word will not return void.
Hmm.
It will not return void in spite of the messenger. It is true in spite of the messenger. Um, but the problem is, it taints the truth for so many people.
Hmm.
Yeah, because the one delivering it is often the building foundation for believing it and understanding it. Uh, it's like many authors, and I could name 3 or 4 right now, that have written some incredible books. One man was probably the most influential evangelical in the world, more than Billy Graham or anyone. And he had probably one of the all-time best-selling books ever. And he took a deep nosedive. And immediately bookstores and everything, should we pull his book? Should we pull his book? I said, that's a difficult question that you personally are going to have to answer. Because what he wrote in the book was true. It was good, accurate, biblically based, culturally relevant. And so does that dismiss what he taught? No. Because truth is truth, regardless of how you present it. But if I were a store owner, it'd be tough for me to carry someone's book like that. If,
Sure.
for example, with that same person, I was scheduled for a huge convention in Indiana of about 8,000 people. And this other person was one of the four speakers on the platform right during this whole thing. And I called him and I said, gentlemen, I am not comfortable coming and lending credence to his lifestyle. No matter what he says is so crowd pleasing, intellectually, everything. If you bring him in, I can't come. And the guy kind of giggled and said, well, I guess we'll get along without you.
Wow.
Yeah. And conventions like that will end up paying a price. And I've always prayed that no one would ever have to say that about me, question being on the platform with me or reading my book or listening to me. So that's how I deal with some of that, Sean.
I want to let folks know writing comments in here that I'm seeing these comments. A bunch of them are coming up, and some of the questions we're going to get to. And at the end, if we have time, want to make sure we can tackle some of these as well. Dad, here's my thoughts on the resources. I couldn't share a resource with somebody because I think a lot of people, it's difficult to just separate the message from the messenger. It's human nature. So, like the book Seeing Jesus from the East was, to me, one of the more insightful books I read last year, but I could never share it with somebody unless I really felt like that person had profound discernment to separate between it. I wouldn't share a video. That's
I
just
would
how
read it.
I've come to
I
look
will
at it.
probably read it again, even though I've read it twice. Uh, it's a, it's one of the most insightful books on
Hmm.
the East and everything in thought life. But you're right. I couldn't recommend it unless somebody really had a problem in this area and I could context the book.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What would you say to those who are either led to Christ through his ministry or strengthened by it? And I've gotten emails and tweets and people just saying things like, this is rocking my faith on a deep emotional level. What encouragement or wisdom would you give to those?
First of all, Ravi Zacharias didn't save you. Jesus did. Ultimately, you grew through Christ. Uh, this is a good warning to be very careful where you place your faith on truth. Now, you look in Hebrews, there was a hall of fame. I think it's important for people to look up to people that have ministered to them. And this is why I believe those people in that position have such an awesome, scary responsibility. Uh, the way they live, everything. Uh, I would say it's one of the biggest motivations. I mean, my greatest motivation is to live a life pleasing to my Savior.
Hmm.
And if I do that, it doesn't matter what else other people say.
Hmm.
If I live a life that is well pleasing to Jesus, it doesn't matter what others say. But I got to make sure I'm not deceived in even thinking that and looking at it. But one of my greatest fears would be if something ever happened like this in my life, the people I've led to Christ, which are hundreds of thousands, um, I mean, it's in multi-millions who have grown through my works, through hearing me speak, the books, the internet and everything. And I'm grateful for that. And it's one of my greatest motivations to stay pure, to
Hmm.
stay faithful, to make sure there's no disconnect between what I teach and what I live. And I'll tell you this, Sean, you've got to listen to others. The person that can be the most deceived is yourself,
Hmm.
no matter how sincere you are. And this is where if you're married and got a good relationship with your wife and she's discerning like your mom, boy, if something like this happened to me, boy, your mom would nail me. And it would break my heart thinking what it would mean to you, to your three sisters, and to mom.
Hmm.
Just that keeps me being very, very careful what I do, what I say, where I go, whom I with. Uh, And this is where I'm thankful for Campus Crusade. They really keep thumbs down on you.
Hmm.
They really check you out. Uh, I'm known in crew where usually they call you just to see how you're doing, you staying fit, what's this? And I remember Steve Sellers or Steve Douglas, who was a global president at that time, said, you know, I've never called Josh. And everybody goes, what? Because he always calls me.
Hmm.
I found out the best way to have a lot of freedom is to keep in touch with those you report to. Keep them informed. Let them know what you're doing. And that it gives me more freedom over the years. They trust me. And so that's some of the things that helped me. But the ministry, GMM ministry, and mainly thanks to Dwayne Zook and Laurel Milton. They've been with me for years. I mean, I think Dwayne's been with me 25 years. Years with Laurel. They run the ministry and they run my life. And they have worked with me to come up with some incredible safety factors in our ministry and my life, everything. I mean, just for example, I'll never stand in a hotel lobby and talk to a woman for more than 3 minutes. I won't get in a car alone with a woman. And this brings me a lot of criticism because churches, conferences will send a woman driver to pick me up to bring me to the conference. And I tell them ahead of time, do not send a woman. And they just think that's so cheesy. They send a woman anyway. And I end up taking a taxi. And boy, they just criticize me for that. But I tell each one of them, if I were to fall morally, it's people like you'd be the first one to criticize me. And it
Wow.
would be. You'd be the first one to
Hmm.
criticize me. And I never go anywhere alone with a woman. Um, it's just, it's deadly. It can be,
Hmm.
no matter who you are. Uh, but Dwayne and Laurel have been two people, and God will use other people in your life if you let them. That means you got to be vulnerable and transparent and honest.
We're going to come back to some of the accountability structures that you're kind of citing that for speakers, for pastors, for ministry leaders to build in. But one of the discussions around this topic has been what's been dubbed celebrity Christian culture that enabled this. That he was larger than life. He had a ministry named after him. So let me ask you a few questions. One thing I've never asked you is why did you name your ministry Josh Mcdowell Ministry? And with what's happened with Ravi, like if somebody high up in Biola had a scandal, it wouldn't take Biola down because it's not built on their name. But RZIM was, so we've seen Canada pulled out this morning, the UK has pulled out. It devastates the ministry and so many people. What are your thoughts on naming a ministry after that? But let's start with why at the beginning you did it.
I
I'd be
can't
curious
believe
to
Billy
hear.
Graham named his ministry after him. But thank God. Yes, you can talk about Ravi in this hand, but there's many Billy Grahams out there in this hand.
Hmm.
I'm sure if no ministry is ever named after anyone, it wouldn't make any difference. I really don't.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't think that's the problem. I feel uncomfortable with the ministry named after me. And I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to change it. My staff would walk me through it and say, no, not right now. But it's interesting because yesterday, I'd say for 2, 3 hours driving around doing errands and everything, I was thinking about the same thing that I wish it wasn't named after me. But on the celebrity profile, I wouldn't want to do away with the concept of it. Why? Robbie was real, more real than life. He administered to a lot of people in a powerful way. starting at Oxford University and all. He wrote some incredible books that has really launched a lot of people. He's helped me in my life in ministry. And I've always looked up to Ravi. But it's important in discipleship, in the church, everything, to make sure that we understand our ultimate, not celebrity, the ultimate person we place our vision on, our trust and our faith is Jesus. Is Jesus. But God uses people to minister to you. God uses people to raise up movements. He uses people to raise up ministries, emphasis, teaching, seminars, conferences, and give credit to those it's due. And for most of these people that I know, they paid a price that the average Christian would never want to pay and wouldn't pay. Most of them have worked so many hours night and day, not to glorify themselves initially, but to glorify Christ, to see more people hear of him and come to Christ and discipled and send them out. And it's good that people have models like that. But I think a lot of it depends on the person. I think you watch a person for a while, you can tell where their sights are set. I do. Now, then on the other hand, you take people like Ravi, and I think people like me and many others I can name who are, what would you say, blown away, personality A, aggressive. I didn't even know there were 23 other letters in the alphabet. I just thought A was it. But A, who becomes a little deceptive, can look somebody right in the eyes and convince them they're telling the truth when they're absolutely lying through their teeth. A personality A can do that. God made them that way. And this is where the Holy Spirit needs to convict. And I wouldn't join a church where the pastors and the staff are not accountable to other people. I wouldn't. You're setting up for a downfall. In fact, I wouldn't even attend a church if the pastors were not on covenant eyes, image and search thing on where you go with your eyes and what you see and all. I forget what they call it. Accountability.
Sure.
I wouldn't go to a church where that wouldn't happen, because why? That pastor is so much more vulnerable to letting himself, his family, the body of Christ, his church, his leadership for a big letdown. And I would always say, well, why don't you want it on there? I mean, I could not take my cell phone or my iPad and carry on an affair. 2 or 3 people read all my emails, my text messages, everything. I mean, if anything suspicious is even seen the image on my phone, let alone goes to a website or anything, it immediately goes to Dwayne Zook and Laurel Milton. And they see it. And that's a good counterbalance for the other pressures in life. Covenanteyes.org, probably. I would say to any pastor, leader, speaker, teacher, I think every Christian ought to be on it. And people that aren't, I got to tell you, it affects my trust of them.
Wow.
It affects my trust of them. Why don't you have it on your iPhone, your iPad? But what blows my mind, now I want to be careful I say that, but his board, his staff, for 10, 15 years, there had to be telltale signs that something's going on here. I don't care who you are, how good you're at deception. There's still those things that shine through. Someday, if God gives me the opportunity, I want to ask some of their board members that. And then I think it's irresponsible where he was given an account of money to use any way he wanted to and no accountability for it. No receipts or anything. One, I hope he paid income tax and all that. Second, he mainly used it for prostitution. And there was no accountability. I mean, right now, I would really be running scared if I didn't have every type of accountability built into my life on relationships, my marriage, even you kids. Because I know if you saw anything in my life or heard from others, you'd confront me, Sean. If you didn't and I found out, boy, would I be mad. Jeez, you wouldn't need to shave after that.
That's true. Let me go back to the question before about JMM. You said when you've wanted to change the name, your staff has said, no, keep it Josh McDowell Ministry. Why? What are the reasons that they would say, and you've ultimately agreed with to keep it that way under your name?
I ultimately agreed to keep it that way because the two of them were very strong in it, even though I wasn't. That's how much I respect them. And their input and wisdom and all, and their walk with Christ. If I recall back, it's been a while now, is that, Josh, you're one of the most known people in the world. People identify with your name where they wouldn't identify with crew with you or anything else. And that is true. I've worked hard to develop a reputation of integrity, honesty, and I've blown it. Oh, boy. Oh, I thank God nobody blew it up on YouTube. But I've blown it over the years. But I build it up, and when somebody sees my name on the internet, on YouTube, in a bookstore, they'll want to go to it with positive attitude and know they're going to get something that will help them grow and understand. And so I could see having a ministry named after an individual. And then I come back and say, well, it depends on the individual.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's fair.
But I know one thing, Dwayne and Laurel, if I started to migrate or I started to drift, they would nail me. Those two people know me. Dwayne Zook traveled with me for 18 years. He knows me, and I couldn't lie to Dwayne. I don't care if I'm personality A, persuasive or what. Dwayne would see through it. And that causes me to go, then I got your mom, the wisest woman. If this was back when God was writing the Bible, he would have the book of Dottie instead of the book of Esther, etc.
Dad, let me ask you this question. If you go back, before Ravi's death, when his reputation, at least broadly speaking, was seemingly secure, if you had asked apologists, theologians, upcoming people in ministry, what kind of ministry they would like to have, I can imagine one of the top answers would be, Ravi, he's written a ton of books, he has a platform, he's traveling around the world, he's meeting with
those who are
leaders.
Philosophical oriented would say that. Yeah.
Well, at least
I think those that are, yeah. Oh,
a big segment would. What lessons should we take away? Because obviously the metric of the world is very different than the metric of the kingdom. So what are your thoughts on that, whether it's some of the pressures or just difficulties that come with having a platform of that name that you would just speak into people to say, you know what? Here's really what matters when it's all said and done?
I would say don't stop doing it. I think it's biblical to admire people who God is using, who's affected your life and all. I think it's good to have people like that that will burn within your heart the desire. I want to be used too. I never want anyone to say, I want to be like Josh McDowell. I hope people say, I want to do what he does. I want to have the impact that he has.
Hmm.
So it's on the message, not the messenger. It's on the method, not the man. But I got to tell you, I know most leaders in the world over the last 20, 25 years. And most of them are really genuine. They're authentic. They're humble. And I meet some that I'm uncomfortable around. And sometimes I say so, sometimes I don't, because sometimes it can be cultural that I'm uneasy with. But if God moves in my conscience to say something, then I got to speak out. And I have to admit, I've lost a few friends, and I've had a few people really take task with me because I confronted them.
Now,
And
when you say leaders, you mean Christian leaders you're talking about.
yes, yeah.
That's
Well, even secular leaders can be tremendous models, I think. I remember I looked at Governor Hatfield of Oregon. Now, he was an outspoken Christian also, but he impacted my life. I mean, he had a powerful impact in people's lives and government and everything. And I can't believe I sent him a letter once and said, I mean, I was a nobody. And I said, I'm doing a speaking tour of the country and I'm coming through Oregon. Would it at all be possible to spend 15 minutes with you? I've got several questions, and you've been such a positive impact in my life. Oh my gosh. He has a secretary call up and said, the governor is really looking forward to meeting with you. Could you
wow.
make it 45 minutes? And we sat in there for about an hour and a half. I did with Governor Mark Hatfield. I mean, it was thrilling. I looked up to him. I admired him. I learned from him. And I'll tell you this, if he'd gone sideways, he'd had a greater impact on me negatively than Robbie did.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I find balance with Robbie. God used him. God used him in many people's lives. And God knew this was coming down the road.
Hmm.
I don't understand it all. I can't give answers to it all. But I thank God for Ravi Zacharias' life and ministry in my life.
Hmm.
And there's so much positive there. It's helped me to ride through the negative.
Hmm. That makes
But
sense.
I got to say, I could be a Ravi Zacharias except for by the pure grace of God.
Hmm.
All
Dad, I
of us could
remember
be.
when I was a kid, I don't remember how old I was. You came home and told me that you got a doctorate, and it didn't make sense to me because I only associated doctorate with medicine. I was like, this makes zero sense. But it was an honorary doctorate, and I mean, you have a number of them, but you've chosen not to use Dr. Josh McDowell in different settings. What are your thoughts on when that came out about Ravi using the doctorate? Because that broke early. What, I mean, why don't you, I guess, in your life, why have you chosen not to do that?
The reason I don't has no inference or reference to Ravi.
Hmm.
There's nothing wrong with using a doctorate, an honorary doctorate, because most of them are not given unless you have earned it.
Hmm.
Because that seminary, whatever, puts their reputation on the line with you. But I felt uneasy, even if it wasn't an honorary. Just me, my person, I would feel easy. People introduce me as Dr. Josh McDowell. People still do it. And I take them aside and say, I prefer not to be. Just be introduced as Josh. And that's just me. It doesn't mean anyone else using it. There's nothing wrong. It's very honorable. And people work for it. Sean, you've got a doctorate. Let me tell you, you worked for it. You earned it. But I feel uncomfortable using it. It's not me. Your reputation should be in your name, not a degree. And that's just me. It doesn't mean it's wrong when Ravi used it, anyone else, unless you pass it off. I don't like the word term earn, because I think I earned the honorary doctorates I got.
Sure.
I mean, I've worked harder than most people ever work for a PhD.
I can second that.
But it's not me.
That's fair. I think what's interesting is my perspective on this was I had seen how much you have worked and completely recognize that if somebody called you that, I'm like, hey, he's worked as hard or more probably than most doctors I know. But I think with Ravi, Albert Mohler shared a story recently on his briefing about how he was just asking Ravi at dinner, hey, where'd you earn your doctorate? And he said he gave the most evasive, defensive response to it. So he was pawning off as if he had earned it when it wasn't. That's where a lot of the deception, I think, came in. One thing that people have said is, why are we bringing this up?
I was wondering if Al asked me that question, I would probably say, well, in 50 some years of ministry, I earned it. I think I earned the honorary doctorates that I have.
Sure. I get it.
I keep trying to think of another description for institutional doctorate. There we go, an institutional doctorate.
Got it. That's fair. Some people have said, look, Ravi's dead. He can't defend himself. Why are we bringing this up? And part of my response is, well, there's probably a ton of victims that are still out there that need voice and healing and be cared for, and lessons we need to learn to minimize this happening again. It's not to pile on him.
Sean, here's the point. It's not a private affair. It's a public. And people say to me, I'll start addressing, look, it's something private. Oh, do I come unglued with that? I said, no, it's not. It's public. With the ministry you're having, the people you're exposing, everything. It's a public affair, not a private affair. And it's good that this has been happening, Sean, because, as you said, there's so many hurting victims out there, and people that weren't even victims that are hurting, and they need resolution. They need understanding that if nothing more than for your own lesson, it can happen to you. Be so careful. Have the right relationships, the right precautions in your life. I don't care if you're a Christian businessman, a housewife, or whatever. It can happen to you. And so I'm kind of thankful it's carried on. And I think it's about time to let it go. It'll probably go another 3 months. But a lot of people I trust will be helped in it, just through this broadcast. If they'd let it go way back to the beginning, we wouldn't have had this broadcast. And I hope it helps some folks.
I do too. One of the questions I've thought through with this is, why weren't some of the claims believed earlier? Because the writing was on the wall. And I know hindsight is always 20/20, but had there been more of a willingness to believe the victims, I think a whole lot of pain could have been minimized. So I guess I'm asking you, I'm trying to find the balance between when we say just believe the victim, there's been some profile cases of people abusing that and tarnishing people's legacies. And you've told me stories of people, when you spoke on college campuses more, planting prostitutes in the hotel room to set you up to ruin your life in ministry. That kind of deviousness, with the fact that the vast majority of times people won't make up cases of abuse like this because people don't believe them, people demonize them, it tars their reputation. What wisdom do you have for just balancing those two tensions in the public life that you have, but also being someone who shared that you came out and shared the sexual abuse and weren't believed? So you know the hurt of what it means to not have someone listen to you.
It's hard to discern because there are, and it's not just a few, many who have been set up, who've been falsely accused for various reasons, and their lives and ministries destroyed. But it would hurt me to not believe someone that was believable, and it would hurt me as much to believe somebody that wasn't believable.
Okay.
When you were talking about me, I'm aware of 3 times, and this is when I was doing university campuses, they planted women in my hotel room. Like the last time was years ago. A woman was in the bathtub with a curtain drawn. The photographer was in the accordion door closet, waiting for me to walk in, the nude woman jump out, and a picture taken. That's it. Nobody believed me. No one would believe me. And 3 times I came that close. And each time, and whenever I did that, it was one of my requirements. Somebody else had to walk into the room first.
Hmm.
And if now, it's been so long with this year lockdown, if I did 4 or 5 nights at a church, I would have my driver go up and walk into the room first, even now.
Hmm.
Just to be safe.
Wow.
We live in an evil world. We live in a world that's decadent in many ways.
Hmm.
And so feel what it's like to be a victim and not believed. Oh, it would just destroy you. It would crush you. So it's a delicate situation that many people have to face, and I've had to face many times, and you will. Pastors will.
I've got a couple more for you, and then we'll see if we have time for some questions to pull off here. But you talked about this some, but are there any added layers of accountability that you would just suggest or bring in for leaders? You talked about all your cell phones, that every single thing that's sent, every text, every email is read by other people. You talked about traveling with others and that wisdom. Relationships with people close around you that know you, and you build in that accountability so people can ask you those tough questions. Is there anything that you would add that we can learn from this to just do better?
I'll just do it off the top of my head. Give people the freedom to confront you, no matter who you are. Just say, if you see anything in my life, my actions, my attitude, or anything that you might have any question about, if you don't ask me, then you're sinning. And if I respond the negative way to it, react, then confront me with that. Second, so give people the freedom to confront you. That's one of the biggest things.
That's smart.
Second, if I'm flying to a conference and one of my staff females is flying to that conference, we don't go to the airport in the same car. We don't take the same flight, and they don't pick us up in the same car, and we do not stay in the same hotel. And that eliminates a lot of pressure, subtly, morally, etc., in your life. Second, don't be alone with a woman unless it's your daughters and your spouse. I always tell them, if a woman has picked me up, have another woman or a man come with him. have two people in the car. If I were a boss, I wouldn't take a female secretary, someone out to lunch alone. I just think that's stupid. And I would have somebody else go with me too.
Hmm.
Uh, Especially people that are in positions of authority need to be very careful about being alone with the opposite sex, whether it's a woman with a man or a man with a woman. If the boss, the head of the company, is a woman, then I wouldn't go out for lunch alone with one of the men in my staff. I'd have somebody else go with us. Uh, that's important. So never get alone, never ride in the same plane. Give people the freedom. The other is, this is something I do. Anyone could do it, maybe not in the size that I do it. But if anyone and people have asked, why do you talk about your kids and your wife all the time? When you talk, you're always talking about Dottie and your kids and everything. I said, well, one, I can't help myself. I said, if you were the father of these kids and the husband of Dottie, you'd talk about them all the time too. But I said, I don't want anyone to ever hear me that would walk away not knowing I'm a monogamous man in a monogamous relationship, and don't you dare to come onto me. I want everyone that ever hears me speak to know I'm committed to Dottie. I'm committed to my children, my grandkids. And it's a technique I use to help me to stay faithful.
Dad, I love that. I've heard you talk about us kids and mom for years, and I never even connected that, but it makes so much sense to talk and brag, even though people might give some criticism about that on the flip side.
Well, I always say
That,
to them, well, if you had kids like mine, you'd brag about them too.
well, that's kind, Dad. I've got maybe one more for you, and then I mean, there's a ton of questions that have come through
Well, let's
here.
go
I
for a few more
apologize.
minutes.
And then we'll wrap up. Let me ask you to frame it this way. What would be your encouragement for young ministers? Just seeing this happen, what encouragement would you give for them? It could be speakers, could be pastors, could be writers. What encouragement for young?
Get a copy of this video and have it transcribed and let it be your second or third Bible. These things was what I would share individually with them. Get a copy of this. What do you charge? What, $80?
No, it's definitely
well,
not
I get
for this.
60 of it, you said.
Charge
but
nothing for this.
Get a transcript of this document.
Okay.
The other, this is kind of a philosophical, theological, cultural perspective. Ultimately, it comes down to not what you do, but who you are. What kind of person are you? What kind of person do you want to be? Often it's very helpful to ask yourself, what kind of people do I look up to? It'll often reveal your values and your heart. That's how I'd answer that, Sean.
Well, that's a great answer, Dad. All these scandals hit me in different ways just because it's heartbreaking. But when this one hit, just having a father who does a similar thing as what Ravi did, I put myself in the shoes of their family and just almost couldn't realize how devastating this would be. And then thinking about the victims, that would have been the legacy that my father had really left. So you spoke about your imperfection. You're human and have said that a million times, but thanks for being faithful to my mom. Thanks for loving us as kids and just staying faithful to the message for so long.
If I didn't,
Dad.
you and your three sisters would show up at my doorstep.
We would. You definitely taught us to speak truth and to love truth above all. One of the things I say when people, sometimes people press and try to go, "What's your dad really like?" And I say, you know what? My
He's a
dad is the
jerk.
same on stage and off stage. And I've always appreciated that about you. It's not a show, it's not a front. I think it's who you are, and
Well,
it's
thank
encouraged me
God.
to try to live that life as well. Well, there's a ton of other questions that could be raised, but I think you've given us a lot of wisdom and a lot of just feedback. When people come up and ask me my thoughts, I'm going to send them this link. If you know anyone else who's just looking for some wisdom and perspective on this, sharing this with them may be helpful. But Dad, super proud of you. Love you. You're my hero. Thanks for coming on and weighing into this with
Hey,
grace and wisdom.
you're one of my heroes,
Wow.
kid. Golly.
Wow.
I never thought your children would become your heroes. I never did. And
Hmm.
and I tell people he's got three sisters that cut of the same cloth that Sean is. Sean is exceptional, maybe outside of the family, but within the family, he's got his equals in his three sisters, and you know what I'm talking about. They're
Yeah.
top class women. Well, I gotta go here, buddy.
All right. Love you,
Take
Dad. Thanks
care.
so much.
Hey, let's go out for dinner. I'll pray, you pay. God
Sounds
bless.
good. See you, Dad.